Oh, hello, everybody. Welcome to Coming Out with Lauren and Nicole. We are a weekly podcast where we have on queer folks from all walks of life. They tell us the tales of how they came out to friends, family, and the world at large.
Because who doesn't love a coming out story?
Whose voice is that?
I'm back, everybody. It's Nicole, in case you forgot what my voice sounded like, although it is booming, so probably you did not, and I'm sorry if it just boomed on your ears. Anyway,
this is very exciting.
I'm very excited to be back. It is me in the flesh now with a 7-week-old baby. Oh my goodness. Life has been crazy, but for those of you who do not follow me on the socials, I gave birth on 1/23/21, so 1/2/3/2/1, which is super cool, to a little baby named Leif Kim. That is his first and middle name, and after my sister. And he is a joy. He is very easy. He is waking me up every 3 hours during the night, which is not so joyful, but I'm used to it now. And yeah, life is good. And if you do want to follow me, I am posting an obscene number of baby pictures, which I genuinely fooled myself into thinking I would not be that person, and now I am that person. So I promise I won't always do that, but it's going to be like that for a little while. So anyway, I'm back. Hi.
Yay! We're reunited.
Woo!
And it does feel so good.
It does.
And so when Nicole and I were talking about who our first guest back to usher Nicole, to welcome her back into the podcast, this person came up immediately. We are here today with Gina Young. Hi, Gina.
Hi, friends. How's it going?
Good.
Gina wears many hats, as the saying goes. Gina is a writer, director, a creator and curator of queer spaces, which is something we will definitely talk about. And if you are a longtime listener of the podcast, you may know Gina as the person I refer to as the lesbian godfather of Los Angeles.
Accurate.
Yeah, I mean, Gina's one of
Which
those
I did
people...
not even know you were calling me. I found this out via Twitter.
I
found this out via Twitter.
Yeah.
I can't even believe this.
Yeah. More than once I've referred to you as the lesbian godfather of Los Angeles, because I, even just in prepping for this episode, I was trying to remember how I met you, and I have no idea, because it's just like, you're just sort of like in the ether, and it's like...
ubiquitous,
You're just... Yeah, you're like at every sort of queer... So I don't even remember how I first met you, but I feel like you are connected to all of the queers in LA. Like, you're just...
I'll make you an offer. You can refuse.
Yeah, consent is very important to our community.
Consent is important to me, so I will make you an offer. You are welcome to choose or not choose to consent.
But yeah, and we were talking off mic, many success stories of people finding love, or at least lust at your events. So yeah, Gina is just all over the LA queer community, and we're so excited to have you.
And I will say, for my part, I was thinking so Gina and I both went to NYU, different times. But then we're like in the same general big NYU mafia, because there is that out here.
We collect each other.
And then, yes, very much.
We collect each other. I collect NYU actors and writers and the whole thing.
I mean, it's a good group. Whatever. And then I feel like we connected at the Sweat Spot, I think, was probably where we actually connected, and then LLO.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, because I was thinking back, and I was like, it was pre-LLO. So for those of you who don't know, if you haven't read what I refer to as the liner notes, otherwise known as the episode description, but will always be the liner notes to me because I'm permanently living in 1992. Gina was the director of Lesbian Love Octagon, and we have had several people who were involved in that. And so So it was inevitable also, because we're just literally collecting the entire cast and crew of Lesbian Love Octagon on here. But that's how Gina and I then connected in like an artistic way, which was obviously a wonderful experience. So there you go. So that's you. So please, you're always up to something in the queer art space in ways that are just so enriching and inspiring. So please, if you would share with our audience, like what you do.
What do I do? I mean, what does anyone do right now? We stare at the walls, we binge TV, we take walks around our block. That's what pandemic life is. No, but on a deeper level, you know, I tell queer stories. I try to represent underrepresented stories. And I'm really dedicated to creating queer space and creating, you know, events both online and in the real world where our community can gather and find each other.
Yeah. And you have your own theater company.
I do. It's called Sorority.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. I love it's like
that name is tongue in cheek. Yeah.
Yes. But it's perfect because never did I want to be part of a sorority until that theater company.
Oh, exactly. I was literally never ever in a sorority, and I was like anti the entirety of sorority culture until I was like, wait, why don't we have our own? Like, why don't we make our
that
own?
Shit.
Yes.
Right, exactly. Why don't we reclaim it and make the kind of like expansive, genderful sisterhood that we want to see that includes way more types of people, you know?
Love it. Go ahead, Lauren.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of that, how do you identify?
That is a great question. Let's see. I like the pronouns she and they. I kind of joke I'm a queer, lesbian, gay, homosexual.
Ooh,
I was really into the term dyke for a long time, and I think that still resonates because it's got that like harder edge. But then I also was a lesbian folk singer for a long time, so it's like I'm both a lesbian and a dyke, and I'm queer and non-binary and gender woo, and yeah.
That's my first question. Is they more recent? Because, that's what I thought. Because I'm like, I feel like I remember initially on your emails seeing she, her, but then I was like, maybe I'm misremembering. But yeah, so that's a
yeah. Well, speaking of coming out stories, I mean, so it's like it's a lifelong process, right? Because I think that for me, the thing about they was the queering of femme and how like femme within our community is often seen as more straight somehow, which is not true. And that's something that's always bothered me. And with my own identity, I've had to like really deal with this for much longer than I actually realized. That like, I think I talked about this in another interview I did recently where back when I was like in my early 20s, I identified as androgynous. But then that term androgynous came to mean like masculine. Like it was very much like, oh, if you're like, a queer woman who's like very masculine, that's androgynous. Or just
so
someone who's very middle, like someone who's like very like, you know, are they a man or are they a woman? Like that's basically what androgyny means. Right. So then I was basically like, oh, I'm not allowed to use that word. So I like stopped using that word. You know, and then people were like andro, and that was like another way of saying butch. And I was like, well, I guess I'm not that, so I'm not allowed to be that. And it's interesting how like language is just this thing that continually evolves in our community. And I think that's why it's so funny that people get hung up on terms a lot and on arguing over terms. And I'm like, it all just keeps changing over time. And if we'd had these same terms, you know, back in the 50s or the 80s or whatever, we probably all would be using different ones. And then 10 years from now, we might all be using different ones than we use now. And it's all beautiful. It's all okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I've definitely gone back and watched some queer stuff that was like formative for me. So, you know, 90s, 2000s, whatever. And I've sort of started like re-identifying people where I'm like, if this were being made today, this person would totally be non-binary, or they'd be trans, or they'd be whatever. And it's just, that's the thing, is that like, it was just different. It was, you know, butch, or it was, like you said, androgynous or whatever. Just different language for the same types of stuff, and I think just makes people feel more seen now to have more specific things. But that's a really interesting point that you bring up about like feeling androgynous but presenting femme, and then feeling like you can't claim androgyny because of a presentation thing, not like an inner sort of feeling. Yeah.
Like 100% because of how I'm bred.
Yes.
Because like how I'm bred dictates how I'm supposed to feel, which is like, we all know that that's not how things work. And the thing that I love about they is that it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Like some people who use they, it's because they feel that they are very much both, and I say both in quotes that you can't see because like obviously we know there's not two genders, but like some people really do feel like they are both. Some people feel that they are all. Some people feel that they are neither. And I feel often that like I'm sort of more in that like almost like agender or neither land, or a little bit of both. So I don't know, and that's definitely like a newer thing, and it's really interesting to be, you know, kind of approaching elder queer status.
I love that you refer to yourself as an elder queer.
Well, legit, I feel like a little bit of a queer elder at this point, and I love that younger queers invented new language that like I got to learn from. And there was a point where I was touring with this gay musical. It was the It Gets Better tour, and it was the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles. And the stuff that I was learning out on the road, I mean, I learned so much new language. And I was like, is it really possible that at my age I can still be figuring things out about myself? And the fun answer is, y'all, yes. Yes, life is long. It's also really short. Life is long and short at the same time.
Oh my God. That's the mantra of this past year.
Yes.
Like, seriously.
Life is both and all things and no things and
right.
Andrew
Time is not real, but also time is dragging. And
it is.
And is a flat circle.
Yes.
And I will plug for the millionth time, if you haven't seen it, Google the gender unicorn, or go to our website where I have embedded it in our resources, because that's exactly what you're saying, where it's the when you were saying in terms of androgynous, like you might be perceived as femme, but you feel androgynous. And we thought those things were the same, but the gender unicorn does an amazing way of differentiating what you feel inside versus what your outside presentation is versus what your intellectual understanding is versus what you're sexually attracted to. It's just a really cool diagram.
And one of my, I love that. I will check it out. And one of my acting students said the most amazing thing. They said the other day, gender is for flirting. Ooh! Like, what is gender? Gender is just for flirting.
Oh, God,
and
that's
I was
great.
Like, oh, my God. I was so shook because I was like, I do actually think that I have spent my whole life making myself more femme because I am usually attracted to masculine people who are more attracted to feminine people, right? Like I'm usually attracted to like butch dykes, and they often, not always, want like a femme. So then I kind of like curved my identity, and I'm not like mad about it, but I do think it's interesting that like in a vacuum, my gender identity is more like paper bag / bowl of oatmeal, you know? And then, you know, whereas if I have a hot date, like, for example, if I have a hot date, then I maybe do want to wear lipstick and heels, but I know some femmes who wear lipstick for themselves.
Yeah. Oh!
And I find that shocking because I would literally never put on makeup for myself. Like
fascinating.
Yeah. No,
I would never, ever, ever, ever put on makeup for myself, but I'm happy to do it for a hot date. So
that
Gender
makes
is for flirting
sense.
is like such an amazing trademark. Or, well, you shouldn't. That would be stealing. But tell your student to trademark
it was Jack McCarthy. Jack McCarthy, shout out.
That's genius. Put it on T-shirts. Like, just that. What a great phrase.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I'm just now thinking back to like, this is also what's so interesting about, well, I think a lot of things are interesting about being bisexual, but this specific thing is so, it feels so relevant because I mean, like, I literally forever felt like I had like two separate wardrobes. I had two separate like ways of being. Talk about code switching, like when I'm going out with guys and when I'm going out with girls, and like. And even though there was obviously some crossover because I'm still the same person, very much different ways of being in those two spaces, and so much of that came down to gender is for flirting, like so much of
wanting
it.
to be seen.
Yes.
I mean, right? Like you wanted to be seen by the people you were trying to attract.
Exactly. Yes. Wow, blowing my mind. Oh, Jack, you're amazing.
Already blowing our mind.
My pleasure.
So then, yeah, where does your story start?
All right, so here's the fun, like the main reason I wanted to do this podcast, because maybe you've never had this story, or maybe you've had it before, but I just thought it would be fun to say. Part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast is because I have technically never come out.
What? Oh, yes!
Like I've technically. Now I'm saying technically because if you look at my website, it's like Gina Young is a very gay person with queer things, and I'm like wearing a t-shirt that says queer, and everything about me is like, in fact, I think a lot of people in the world probably think I'm like too gay and over the top, and I'm sure there's straight people who are like, why is like all of her work about queerness and like why is she so like lesbian this, lesbian that? But the truth of the matter is I never actually had a sit-down conversation with any person in my life where I was like, I'm gay. I'm gay. I never did.
I never did. And it's because Foster.
Oh, yes. And it's because, honest to God, as a teenager in the 90s, I was like, why should I have to do that when straight people don't?
Yeah.
Like, why should I have to make an announcement that I know my Catholic family is going to be really upset by and try to talk me out of, when like a straight kid doesn't need to like sit the family down and be like, Mom, Dad, I'm straight. I just want you to know I'm probably going to marry a woman, and this is, you know, like
my kid might have to do that, but otherwise, yeah.
Right. Thankfully now we live in an age where I do think a lot of people that are having kids are like, man, if my son turns out to be straight, I don't know what I'm gonna
like
do.
A heteronormative, like if I have like a heteronormative kid, you're like, what? Anyway.
Yeah, you're gonna have to just do extra work. It's gonna be extra labor to just be like,
what'll the job market look like for them? Ooh.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that was a conscious choice that you made, like to not have quote unquote like a coming out moment, because that was like
that's
unfair,
awesome.
Basically, that's amazing.
Yeah, because I was a bitter, resentful punk rock teen, and I was just like, I'm not doing it. So I just started slipping into conversations, like with my extended family. I would just be like, blah blah blah, my girlfriend, blah 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 blah, and I would see the face have like a flicker of like, wait, is she just saying girlfriend like we say it in Philly, Jersey, or is she saying girlfriend like does she mean her girlfriend? Like, and I would just like blow past it because I was like, I'm not giving anyone a chance to talk me out of this. Like there is not going to be a moment where anyone gets to talk me out of this. And there's very specific reasons for that. So I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., nation's capital, hence why I'm so political. And I went to Catholic school for like my whole life, basically 13 years of Catholic school. And so as you can imagine, like queerness did not exist. It was not a thing. You were not allowed to be it. There were no role models. I think there were times where I asked, where I was like, are they gay? You know, and I was told absolutely not. Why would you think that? How could you say that? You know, it was just like these things were not discussed in any way, shape, or form. And I was the queerest kid. I mean, when I say to you, and I was femme. So that's the other part that was confusing about it, is that I was like, I remember some of my earliest queer memories are like preschool, that I wanted all the other girls to dress up as princesses and then I wanted to make out with them, you know? So it would just be like, all right, I'm Snow White, you're Cinderella, you're this, you're that. You know, we would all put on all the pretty dresses and then I'd be like trying to grab them and kiss them. I also like distinctly remember having a friend that I had play dates with who like she was the cowboy and I was the saloon girl.
Oh my God.
Which is like very much sets the stage for my later life. Not to get too graphic. I mean, you know, we were children, so obviously it was very minimal, but yeah, but that's where we form our, you know, most basic desires and the things that we like. And I was just like, oh, like clearly I like girls, but that didn't exist at all. And the funniest part was, I think the first time I was ever called a lesbian was 4th grade. And that's why I eventually ended up writing a play called Tales of a 4th Grade Lesbo. I wrote that play because 4th grade was the first year that I had someone be like, God, Gina, you're such a lesbo. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, that can't possibly be right. Because at that time, the only images I had seen, like I was like, but I don't look like a gym teacher, right? Like the stereotype was like, which meanwhile now, please send any hot gym teachers my way, like I am available. But at the time I was like, lesbians are butch, they have mullets, like I am not that. So I can't possibly be a lesbian because I don't look like that. So like femme was not really read as queer. And yet the other kids, they saw me. Like the other kids called me out. They could feel it. They knew. They were like, something's off about this one. Like, you're so gay. Why are you always trying to kiss the girls and stuff like that?
Did you consciously know that you were attracted to girls at that age, but you still didn't think that could mean lesbian, because to you lesbian was like a visual aesthetic as opposed to like being attracted to women? Or was it all
I mean, when I say to you, it
interesting.
was 100% subconscious. Like, because again, the words almost didn't even exist, and the identity itself was so reviled that I just absolutely could not be that. Like, there was no way in hell I was that. So then I was just like, oh yeah, I have a crush on this boy who happens to have long hair and like beautiful, like soft skin and blue eyes. Like, you know, so then I eventually segued into crushing on boys who looked like girls. And all of my junior high and high school crushes looked like hot girls. I mean, they absolutely look like people I would date now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Yes.
The skater era of the 90s, like if you've got that like River Phoenix or Ryder Strong, which still sounds like a porn name, or like
it's so hilarious.
Like,
yes.
Edward
and they were
Furlong
beautiful.
was mine. Like they all had lesbian like awning hair, is what I called it. Where it was Backstreet Boys hair basically.
Yeah.
Like,
but even like this like. And I mean, these were mine, and still is Brad Pitt. I talk about Brad Pitt all the time.
I mean,
Brad Pitt is so beautiful, like in the face. There's feminine about him, like, and especially if you see him with his like '90s long hair, it's like, oh my god. I mean, and Leonardo DiCaprio when he was a teenager, like all of these
Titanic.
Yes, all these guys are so pretty.
My whole wall, I'm not kidding, was posters of Kurt Cobain.
Yes. Oh my god, Kurt Cobain.
Leo DiCaprio. And Criss Cross, because I thought both members of Criss Cross were extremely sexually attractive.
They were very cute.
But they were pretty too, because they were young. You know, like they had pretty bone structure, and like their faces, they hadn't really like become quote unquote men yet. So they were still, to my mind, very, very pretty, and I liked it. So that brings me to an interesting era, which is the era of junior high and high school where I was called a slut. Like, I developed a slut reputation, even though I hadn't really done anything with any of the boys. But it was because I didn't care the way that I should. And what I mean by that is, like, I would, like, sometimes, like, just, like, do stuff with a boy or, like, not care or, like, make out with a boy. And another girl would be super in love with him and would be like, you slut, how could you do that? And I would just be like, I don't know. I guess I just, like, it doesn't really mean anything to me. Like, none of these things that are happening with boys are really, like, I mean, they had a certain amount of teen drama. Sure. Like, I definitely had a little bit of teen drama with boys for sure. But for the most part, like, I remember that when I would make out with boys, I would be like, okay, I'm going to give him 10 more minutes. And then I'm cutting it off, you know? Like I had like a timer on in my mind that was like, I'm going to let him do this for 10 more minutes and we're done, you know? Because it was just like, yeah, it feels nice. And I like the attention and I like the social status that comes from having a boy like you. But it was not until the first time that a girl kissed me that I was like, oh, shit. Yeah.
See, I had that exact issue being called like a slut and stuff from the time that I was young, and not because of anything I was particularly doing. Like, it's not like I had sex earlier than anybody else. Like, it wasn't that, but it was just, it's funny when you say, because when you first said because I didn't care and I didn't like other girls would like the boy and they'd be like, how dare you kind of thing. I related to that, but not in the exact way that you're saying, because I get it. If you're like, I don't have an attachment to this, like this doesn't mean anything to me. Like it was more that, going back to gender and gender roles and things like that, is that I think the way that I approached that stuff was more typically boy-like.
Oh, God, yeah.
Where like I wasn't playing by the rules of like what girls are supposed to do, and like how the sort of propriety along with that. Like, I didn't understand why, you know, if your friend liked a boy, you know, a couple months ago, and then now you like him, but that was over already, like why that was a problem. Like I didn't see why, like those rules didn't really make sense to me. And I feel like, and in retrospect, I'm like, oh, that was totally like identifying with, because most of my friends were guys too. And it was like, I was from almost a gender role perspective, identifying much more with them, and then being called a slut because I was still a girl. Yeah. So anyway,
and that's exactly what it is that like a lot of the girls would wait and like lay back and let the boys come to them, whereas I would be aggressive. And if I liked a boy, I would like roll on up and be like, let's go, you know? And I think that, again, that made me a slut. Even though like I wasn't having sex, not that sex is wrong or evil. Like I don't believe that sex is wrong or evil, but I was young and I was not. I didn't do barely anything at that point. And so it was interesting how the reputation, you know, and then of course the boys loved to spread that reputation, and it was just really toxic. And I think, you know, middle school, high school, they're the worst. They're the worst. And I hope that our culture is getting better, but I don't really know. Who knows? So
I think it is with the whole sex positivity movement.
I hope. I don't know.
I think it is. I mean, if
and
euphoria
consent,
is to
like
be
teaching
trusted,
consent.
They're all fucking out of the womb. So you gotta keep an eye on I'm just saying, watch your child.
Keep an eye on Leif.
Because they start fucking early according to television, which is all the interaction I have with teenagers.
Yeah,
as it should be. Anyway,
but
I digress.
Yes. So then high school or junior high until the first time that you were with a girl.
Yeah, when was the first time?
So let me tell you the best part of the story. So high school, my best friend and I all of a sudden decided like, and actually in the beginning of high school, I had a brief period of like identifying as asexual. But for me, I think that was truly because I was trying to figure out why I didn't feel for guys what I was supposed to feel.
That's big though. Did you talk about that to people? Because I feel like that term was like not even super well known.
There was no like ace culture back then that I know of. It was purely something that I wrote about in my diary all the time. It was a thing I journaled about constantly. It was not because I had read the term elsewhere. It was purely because I was like, why am I not feeling what I'm supposed to feel? I guess I must be asexual.
I certainly wondered if I was asexual in high school. So very similar experience.
Like, definitely. I was just like, I don't want these guys. I'm not into it. I don't like them. And also, the more that they become men, the less attractive they become to me, right? Because I liked them when they were like young and pretty. And then as soon as they start to become men, I'm like, oh, something about this is a no for me. That's a no for me. So my best friend and I... I don't know where, we just decided in high school, we all of a sudden had crushes on girls and we placed a bet. To be clear, Catholic all-girls school. I know, your podcast just became very seamy. The look on your face is so great. We should screenshot that later. I want that to be the screenshot for this podcast because you both look so shocked and appalled. I know, this sounds like the start of a porno. It's not. I'm not going to go into detail. Catholic all-girls school, homophobic environment, you know, a lot of the girls throwing around slurs and stuff like that. It's not great. And somehow my best friend and I are like, we both develop crushes on girls. And we have a bet going of like, who's going to get theirs first. And I won.
Yes!
And she seduced me. She seduced me using my graphing calculator in trigonometry class.
Fucking Christ.
This is the teen movie I want to see. Do you know what I mean? Like this is like where all the boys have the bets about the whatever. No, this is the teen bet movie that I want to see.
Well, thank you for saying that because I am a writer and it never occurred to me that this is the movie.
This could be.
I guess I should write this movie.
You should write.
Fine. If anyone out there wants to finance this, like I've got it. I can have a script in a week. Like finance this film. All right, great. So, you know, TI-86 or 89 or whatever the calculator's called, they had like rudimentary texting functions, right? Like we didn't have cell phones with text messages at that time, but you could on your graphing calculator like text each other these little messages to pass each other during class. And she did that. And I was like, oh my God, what is this feeling? You know, like it was just like, and she didn't even, you know, she was just sort of like, I think her text was like, why are you so mysterious? Or something like that. Like something that was definitely like, okay, this could be a person hitting on you, but it could also just be like someone being stupid or funny or whatever. And I like melted and died and was like, that's it. It's all over. Fast forward, next thing I don't know, we become friends, we're hanging out. The whole thing is very ambiguous, but also not ambiguous. And one day she offers me a ride home from school. Oh, and to be clear, this is, let's make the story even more exciting, which is that it was kind of like a wrong side of the tracks love. Like she lived in Potomac, which you may know from like Real Housewives
that's
of,
the only
right?
thing
Like
I know about Potomac.
Yeah, so she lived in, oh God, I shouldn't be, is this all details I shouldn't give? Whatever, everyone at my school lived in,
I think a lot of people live in Potomac, you're saying.
A lot of people live in Potomac. So she lived in Potomac and drove like a Lexus. I lived in DC and rode the subway.
Oh
so one day she offers me a ride home in her Lexus, and at a stop, and she takes the long way home. And she's like, why don't we drive through Georgetown? Why don't we just drive around for a while? Like, why don't we just drive? And I'm like, yeah. Wherever you want. Should we just go to Vegas and get married? Okay. And sure enough, at a stoplight in Georgetown, she like leans across and grabs me and kisses me.
Oh my God.
And when I say to you that like the roof blew off the car, like it was just one of those moments where I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gay. Like there was never any doubt. There was never any confusion. I never had a moment of like, am I or am I not? Or like, maybe this is wrong. Maybe this is a sin. I was like, nope, this is great. And this is it. Like I just knew, you know what I mean? Like it was that moment where I was like, oh, my whole life makes sense. Like everything in my life, my whole life makes sense right now. And I'm very lucky that being raised as Catholic as I was, like I have like a deep Italian Catholic family. I never felt that it was wrong.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I never felt that it was a sin. I just never felt that it was a sin. I don't know. I just felt like love between two consenting adults. When two consultants. Let me tell you, we consult our crystals. We consult the stars. I just never ever had the thought that like love between two consenting adults could be a sin. So I'm very lucky that I escaped those many, many years of shame. Like a lot of Catholics didn't escape it,
Oh,
you know,
my God,
like a lot of Catholics like went through years and years and years. I'm sure you have. I'm absolutely sure you have. And I was just like, nope, this is great. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Oh my God.
She broke my heart brutally.
Yeah, I mean,
sure, of course.
The first one always.
Of course.
Always.
She broke my heart brutally, but we actually stayed friends. Like I would say that we're still kind of friends to this day. So that's cool. That's an upside to it. And I really never looked back. Like the only really after that, I only dated one person who I guess is kind of a cis guy, but was very queer, like very genderqueer / androgynous / you know, how do I explain it? I don't want to go into too much detail and violate this person's privacy, but you know, basically, like there was one other person I dated, but they were very queer, bordering on trans in their identity, and then after that, it was basically women, non-binary from here on out.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh.
God. Hey, Nicole, do you sometimes want the sensations of oral sex, but without the skin-to-skin contact?
Yes, and sometimes I just want to spice things up with some latex.
Oh, I was aware of that. And look, we get it. There are many ways to get pleasure, and that's why Laurels were created.
You have heard us talk about Laurels before. We absolutely love them. They're a queer-owned, woman-owned company. Laurels are single-use natural latex panties designed to be worn during oral sex and rimming.
Couples, thruples, hookups, spouses, cis, trans, queer, kinky, Laurels are made to help everyone say yes to maximizing pleasure.
Laurels are ultra thin, so you feel every little thing. I can attest to that. Plus, the super stretchy latex is easy on your partner's tongue and allows for tongue and finger penetration, even simultaneously. And let me just insert, pun intended, insert a little anecdote here. So I recently found a use for laurels that I had never anticipated. In post-pregnancy, some of you may or may not know this, you end up bleeding for about 6 weeks afterwards.
Fun.
It's so fun. They don't tell you that. I don't know why, but anyway, it's true. Because your cervix is slowly closing, and you're not supposed to have any penetration because it can cause infection when your cervix is still open. So let me tell you that as not sexy as all that sounds, guess what the solution to that is? Laurels. You can still, get your mojo on postpartum while also feeling completely protected and sexy at a time that you might not feel sexy otherwise. Look at that!
Reclaim the sexiness.
Reclaim it.
Ooh, speaking of which, laurels come in 2 sexy styles. Shorties for fuller coverage or bikinis if you want to bear a bit more.
Laurels are made with your privacy in mind. They're individually packaged in a pocket-sized pouch so you can take them on the go.
And for listeners of this podcast, Laurels is giving 15% off your first purchase today at www.mylaurels.com. That's www.mylaurals.com using the code ComingOutPod.
Yeah, we cannot say enough good things about this product, about this company, and we're really exploring new avenues of pleasure via Laurels in 2021, and we think you should too.
Laurels!
Laurels! So I have had the privilege of seeing some of your photos from like Dyke March back in the day at, in New York. And like, I have to say, I mean, that was part of one of many things that I loved so much about Lesbian Love Octagon, because it took place in like what I refer to as like the golden age of like of the lesbian in New York. Like that was because I was like just behind you guys. Like I basically just missed that, but that was this. I know, but it was like that was
we would have been friends.
We would have, and I would like, but I was living an hour outside of that as I was like as I was figuring all this out, and like I knew about it, and I so badly. I don't know. I remember I was having a moment the other day, like a very nostalgic moment. I was listening probably to Ani DeFranco in my car. I mean, let's be honest. And it was bringing me back to like how I used to envision my life in like an East Village apartment with my girlfriend, with with all of that, with like the Riot Girl stuff and like everything that was happening then. And I don't know. I feel like that was such an exciting time to be out and be part of that like sisterhood. So I don't know. I mean, and I feel like so much to the point where like you've made art about that time period, and like how do you feel? I guess do you feel nostalgic for that? Do you? I don't know what I'm asking, except like there's part of me that feels like that era is gone forever, and I don't know if I'm just an old person about it, or if like there's a quality that's been lost about it, or like, do you know what I mean? Yes,
I do. But the good news is that there's a major renaissance happening among the young people, among the like teenagers who have become the youth have a renewed interest in Riot Girl and all of that stuff. And I actually, when you say that I've made art about it, sometimes I feel like all of my art is about that era. And I also specifically am working on some things like, one thing we briefly touched on but didn't really touch on is that I used to be like an Ani DeFranco style folk singer, and like I wrote all this music. And it's coming up on the 20-year anniversary of when those albums that I put out were released. So I'm about to release the demos from those albums that like maybe nobody cares about, but I think there's a lot of teenagers and young adults on Spotify who've been listening to this stuff. And it came by surprise because I didn't even know my music was on Spotify. And then all of a sudden on Instagram, like my Instagram, I started getting DMs like a few times a week from people being like, yeah, like Punk Rock Dyke is my favorite song, or like,
cool.
And it's this cool thing because, as a queer elder, I look at my stuff and I'm like, so, you know, it's the way that any artist, sometimes you're a little bit embarrassed when you look at the stuff you made when you're young and you're like, oh man, every song that I wrote is like, you know, a lot of them are like, it's raining, it's pouring, gender roles are boring. Like there's a lot of like very like, you know, there's a song called So-Called Straight Girl. There's a song called Punk Rock Dyke. There's a song, like every song is like dyke, dyke, dyke. And it's really funny to me because I didn't even realize that like nobody was doing that. Like to me, it was very natural to do that. And then looking back, I'm like, people didn't use pronouns in the songs if they were queer. Like if you were like a lesbian or like lesbian musicians didn't really use the pronouns of the person they were singing to. Yeah. And most people avoided using identity terms at all. And so I think that even to this day, there's a lot of queer bands that are like, they're definitely, you know, being a lot more overtly queer, but you still can't necessarily hear in the lyrics of the song how they identify or what's going on.
You used to have to be like a detective. Like I remember what a like scandal it was when here's a name most of our audience won't know, but when Sophie B. Hawkins with the damn which
who doesn't know Sophie B. Hawkins?
Young people don't, but there in that song there was the one line where it was like I'm making love to her with the and it was like the one time she said her, and everyone, thank God the internet wasn't like, did it even exist then? I don't remember, but it wasn't what it is now. But everyone lost their shit because she said her once in the song, and that was like the biggest deal ever. So yeah, you really did have to like go in there with a magnifying glass to find out what.
There's things I didn't even put together. Yeah, there's things I didn't put together till this like last year. You know, where I'm like, Melissa Etheridge, our pioneering foremother, put out an album called Yes I Am.
I know, my God. I remember that. Yeah.
I didn't even think about that until like last year.
It was all like it was all like whispering.
Meant, yes, I am a lesbian.
Like she's gay. And people would be like, no, it doesn't mean that. And it was just like, it was all under the radar. Like all of this shit was covert.
Wow.
Or like my whole youth, you know, I went to like Bible camp like so many summers of my youth, and all they played was the Indigo Girls.
What?
And after a certain point, I was like, you do realize that you're like preaching against homosexuality and then playing the Indigo Girls. And people would be like, they're not gay.
Church camp was all about the Indigo Girls. Let me tell you. Oh my God. That's how I knew the Indigo Girls too, was church camp. Like now, granted, I went to like hippie liberal church camp. So like maybe some people knew there because they weren't preaching overtly against gay people, at least, because it wasn't Catholic, but they certainly weren't being like, and they're lesbians and that's okay. Like nobody was doing that. Yeah, it was just like, because it was great folk music, and so it was like, folky, like spirituality, and, like
well, because I was going to camps where we were like, you know, you'd be like building a house, you know, all it's horrible, typical like white savior shit where they would like send us into
really
like poor communities to build
like,
things.
You're building a house.
Exactly. Get out of bed, and a hammer and a nail. Learn how to use my hands. You know, it's very like, ugh. And then also, if you watch their early music videos, you're like, man, first of all, they were hot. They're so hot, but also they're wearing crosses. And so for Christians, that's signifying. The same way that we look for like, I don't know, what do we look for? Tank tops or certain tattoos?
Georgia.
Like they had a cross on. And if you see a cross on someone, you're like, okay, that's my people, you know? That's what they were.
And you're right. Because now, even though I was just like, how do they not know? I'm remembering back to being in school, and like the Indigo Girls were so popular for just like, I remember girls like harmonizing to them in the hallway, because that was like the thing that you did if you were a theater kid, was like, we're gonna harmonize the Indigo Girls. And I do remember I'm having this flashback to a conversation where we were like in the hallway, like and someone was like, you know, like I heard they're gay or whatever, blah blah. And then like the wise girl in our group, I remember her going, they're lesbians but not with each other. And it was like, oh, she has the inside track. Like, she knows.
That would be an album to put out. That would be an album
lesbians,
to put
but
out.
not with each other.
But not with
lesbians,
each other.
But not with each other.
And we were all like, oh,
so
my God,
good.
they are, but not with each other.
Not with each other. Because it's a big difference. Like, it's totally different if they're not with each other. It's like different.
So funny. But I guess there was a time when we didn't know if, I mean, yeah, you're right. Everything was so undercover.
It's interesting. Like, I think, you know, okay, I hate to sound like a broken record, but Ani DeFranco. So, but Ani, like, Ani is an exception to this in the sense that several of her songs did overtly address women.
Yes.
And it was really...
Which is why we loved her.
Exactly. But also, she was able to do that because she was under her own record label. Like, we forget that, like, she turned down enormous record deals to create her own label to make music the way that she wanted to make it. And so she didn't have to answer to anybody. So she was able to do that. I think it's a huge part of why, honestly, she isn't, like, a household name, is simply because of that. But, like, I think about, you know, her... though, like, her bisexual anthem, basically, which is In or Out, like, she never actually says the word bisexual. She never says I'm sleeping with this person, I'm whatever. There's still an ambiguity even to that song. I think for her, that probably was more because of her poetry than anything else. Yeah. Just, like, you know, making it that. But like,
she wasn't hiding anything.
She wasn't hiding anything. And it was I mean, it was why finding her music felt like such a revelation. Honestly.
Totally. I mean, she was indie, you know? Like, Indigo Girls were on MTV. Like, that's how I remember seeing their videos, and Ani DeFranco wasn't. So that's and Melissa Etheridge was on the radio all the time. Like, that's such a great distinction that she was truly indie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
The 90s!
The 90s! Yeah, and the rebirth of interest in the Riot Grrrl movement is really exciting to me. And so I'm actually doing an event with the June Mazer Archives on April 10th that's going to be sort of about my wave of Riot Grrrl, which came right after the first wave. Like, they were kind of like our big sisters, and we were like the Y2K era that, like, followed in their, you know, footsteps or whatever. And so I'm really excited to start doing more events around that, because I realized that I have a stockpile, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of show flyers, zines, records. Like, the amount of memorabilia that I have from that era is staggering. And I just started scanning it and sending it all to the June Mazer Archives, the lesbian archives. And because I was like, somebody's got to want to see this. Not everybody.
Insane.
Hold on.
Not everybody. But somebody really wants to see all of this. And some of it is amazing. And some of it includes those photos that you saw on my Instagram, which are like, that's why I found them, because I was going through all this stuff during a pandemic Marie Kondo situation.
Yes, understandable. Yeah. Wait. Back up.
I know what you're going to ask, because I was saying
there are lesbian archives?
Yeah, what the fuck? I had no idea.
I don't know.
Wait, for real?
I don't know about this.
I'm so excited to share
it with you. I do not know about this.
So the June Mazer Lesbian Archives is associated with UCLA, and the Lesbian Herstory Archives is based in Brooklyn. I think they have their whole own brownstone or something like that. There's also the One Archives, which I think is LGBTQIA, but has, of course, lesbian content. And I'm sure there's more, but those are the three that I have contributed materials to. God. And what is extra cool about these things, first of all, I'm pretty sure that anyone can use them to access for research. So, like, research meaning, like, if you want to go look at stuff, you can, you know, make an appointment to look at stuff, especially if you want to use it for research for a project or you're a student or whatever. And then also, they all make a big point of saying that they're interested in all lesbians and queer women and queer people. Like, it's not just for, like, famous or, like, really historically important. It's like, do you have love letters from high school that you think somebody might want to read someday? You can bring them. Do you have, like, in my case, a lot of the stuff that I have is flyers from shows that probably nobody really cares about. But at the same time, when you see them all at once, you're like, wow. And the conversation I was having with the Mazer that was the most interesting is that they were like, you know, mainstream media says that Riot Grrrl was dead by, like, the mid-90s, but all of these things I have are from, like, Y2K, 2002, and there are, like, hundreds of Riot Grrrl shows, Riot Grrrl zines and stuff still happening at that point. So we have to tell our own stories. Wow. We have to preserve our own history, because if you read, you know, the articles in the mainstream press, they're like, it's dead. It's over. Well, there's nothing left.
For our younger listeners, would you explain Riot Grrrl? Like, what that is for people who don't know?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Riot Grrrl was a movement that happened in music, and it was basically, like, started out of the punk scene, you know, from girls who felt that the scene was really sexist. And it took the form of a lot of bands like Bikini Kill and Bratmobile and zines that they made and stuff like that. And a lot of people, I wish I could quote who said this, because it's really smart and I did not make this up. But that, like, the first wave feminism really focused on like trying to get women the right to vote and all this stuff. Second wave feminism had a lot more to do with like women's rights in the workplace and domestic violence issues and that kind of stuff. Whereas Riot Grrrl was really about like women's cultural creative stake, like being like, we make music, we make zines, we make art, and like fuck you for saying that these things are less than. And it was a really interesting time because the media was brutal and the media was so critical, and like, you know, there were a lot of negative portrayals of these bands and of these things, and it's like a lot of it was because they couldn't handle how important and how feminist they were, and a lot of it was because they couldn't understand, like they wouldn't allow people to be beginners. Like the whole stereotype was like, oh, Riot Grrrls can't play their guitars, right? Like they can't play their guitars well. And it's like, yeah, some of us don't want to hear fucking noodly like masturbatory guitar solos.
Oh my
like
God.
that music doesn't speak to me. I don't need any more cock rock where someone's like it just like doesn't do it for me. I would rather have like a really
Sid Vicious
angry
couldn't play
bass
guitar.
line.
Like that's
such
a thing.
Exactly.
But only women get called out.
Of what punk is.
Oh yeah.
But so that was the some would say that the mainstream media really kind of had a vendetta against Riot Grrrl, whereas for someone like me, Riot Grrrl saved my life. You know, like I was a teenage girl trying to figure out why sexism was so bad, like why were men threatening me on the street and chasing me down the street and harassing me, and Riot Grrrl was like the one place where I heard other people being like, how dare you make us feel threatened and unsafe, and how dare you treat girls like this, and you know, so it's important. And I think it had its flaws, everything does, and that's why we need to just preserve the history of these things. And that's the thing, is that I'm like, it was still going strong years after people said it was over.
Definitely.
And no one's going to tell that story if we don't. So,
oh my gosh, I have stuff I want to go through and submit.
I know.
Yes.
Can I just submit like bad poetry I wrote post breakup? Because I have a lot of that.
Probably.
I was just thinking about that.
I think they will take like everything. I think they would want your podcast ephemera. Like I think they would want stuff related to their podcast.
Let's
like
get archived.
I mean, and love letters. I mean, whatever you got. Like I've given them scripts from my plays. I've given them sorority merch because, as you may know, my theater company makes like sweatshirts and you know, tote bags and stuff like that. And I'm like, I think you guys need these. Like I think you guys need because they have a whole collection of like buttons spanning from when feminist buttons started getting made to the now. So
we could send some of our coming out pod buttons.
We can send our old Find Ricky ones that we can't use anymore because we found out we spelled Ricky wrong. So we can totally send them those.
Yeah, we could definitely send them those. That has a good story about it too.
And all of these things are online. Like Google. I mean, Google is your friend. You know, just Google lesbian archives and you'll find several, I'm sure.
Oh my God.
So,
okay. Yeah.
We both have like so much.
You go and then I'll go.
Okay, great. I love it. So
I can talk for hours. I'm here all night. This is my Saturday night. So we're partying.
So sorority. I want to talk about what drove you to, like, you are, like we said, so good at creating queer community. So did that come out of you being like, I can't find it, or it's too hard to find, or there's not enough, or like it's just so amazing that we all bitch about there's no brick and mortar lesbian bars. How do you meet girls? Blah, blah. We all bitch about it, but you're actually doing something about it and have been for years. And I want to like motivate people listening to like be able to feel empowered to do that in your own communities, wherever you live. So just like how you did it. Like the shorthand version of like, how did you do this?
I wish I knew. I really wish I knew. So sorority I started because Los Angeles did not have a hub for like queer and feminist performance, and I wanted it to. And I felt like it was weird that like I've lived in a bunch of other cities where there would be shows all the time, even things like open mics or like weird performance art things that weren't necessarily good, but where you just knew these were events you could go to where you were going to see queer women and they would have like the right vibe and you would have a good time. New York was full of them. When I lived in Seattle, we definitely had them. And then I moved to LA and I was like,
There's a distinct lack of culture here.
Just in general,
No, there is culture. Like, I actually think LA is amazing, but it's spread out and like
yes, 100%.
It was really just like the Venn diagram didn't exist, right? Because the performers all existed. The performers all existed, and you know the audience was there. It just like there were certain things that weren't lining up, and so I was like, this is going to be an experiment. I got this tiny black box theater. I'm just going to do a late night. I called it a late night K-hole for new short works, and all the performers were like women, trans, queer, and it was. I was a mess at that point. I was like going through a breakup. I was like, we'll see what sticks. We'll see if this is any good. And the response was just through the roof. I mean, every show we did, we had people out the door. We've like never had a show that wasn't standing room only. We did one show, like the theater could comfortably seat 70 people. And we had 99 people like standing in the doorway, like crushed up against each other. And you know, and I was a former fire marshal in New York, so I was very careful about like making sure the exits were still clear. And, you know, and so I was like, okay, the audience is here. The performers are here. This is a thing that we need, you know? And so the cool thing is that the only cool thing about sorority post-pandemic is that we've been able to do it on Zoom. We've had performers from Brooklyn, New Orleans, like different places can now perform, and audience members from Missouri or whatever. Like, it's just like, everybody can be in the same Zoom room, which is a really nice perk of that. So, Nice.
Oh, I love that. Yes, see, all of you out there, you can create queer space.
Yeah,
there's just always so much there's so much more demand for it than people think. Like, if, you know, honestly, like you're if you are feeling it, someone somewhere near you is feeling it too. I promise. That's generally true of anything.
And we're dealing with, it's the era of the demise of the lesbian bar, and I get it, and it's super upsetting that we don't have these brick and mortar spaces, but we have for the last, 20 years or more been doing the whole like one night a month at the club. Like, you do the one night a month party, and that's like the queer nights, like, whatever. And I'm like, those are great. Those are valid, and we should make sure we keep doing them. And I mean, my biggest advice for people wanting to start them is just find your 2 or 3. Like, you just need the people who really want to have it in their space. You need the people who are really good at promoting. You just get those people on the same page, and then you got to be nice to people. And that's it. Like,
and you're so good at
you can't be cliquey. You can't be cliquey. You can't be elitist. A lot of people try to be elitist about stuff, and you cannot. And why? Why would you want to be?
Yeah, you're just such a connector. I feel like you have such a gift for just like, oh, this person, this like, you're just like, you're the lesbian godfather. Like it's just like being out in the community and knowing people in the community and knowing who you can approach to like host this thing or do this. It's just, it's such a skill.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my question, which I like previewed when we were getting ready for the pod, but actually was like perfectly segued from talking about lesbian history, right? And lesbian archives and things like that. So, there's obviously some tense online discourse between certain members of the lesbian community and then trans activists and trans allies and things like that. And there's a lot, I think, first of all, that gets way blown out of proportion online. And I fucking wish people would just be in person and have conversations and treat each other like, humans. That would, I think, solve a lot of these issues, frankly. But one of the things that I've seen come up and that I think is happening on a lot of levels in a lot of different sectors when we're looking about like at certainly at race and the way things have been treated in history, et cetera. But specifically when we're looking at lesbian history and preservation of lesbian history and preservation of lesbian culture, what are your thoughts on trans inclusivity in all of that? And do we think that certain things about lesbian history need to be amended or have like a what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out. Like a asterisk. Thank you. Like, guys, baby brain, so real. Things like that. Like I think about the way in which I think you guys changed a little bit of LLO to be more trans inclusive, and you'd made like an announcement at the beginning talking about how much things had changed since you even like first approached that material and stuff like that.
Sure, or just that terms were different. Like people were using different terms.
Yes.
So how do we be true to the time period without being sensitive?
Yeah, and so I guess my question is, you know, I'm sure you've been watching this discourse happen and have feelings or thoughts about it, and I guess my question to you is, you know, where do you land on all of that, and do you feel that like, I don't know, I guess where do you land on all of it? I don't know. I have so many thoughts or questions.
Well, to start with a tangential anecdote, it is weird how the internet just creates a space where people can be so much meaner to each other without ever being accountable. There's only one time that I've ever dealt with like a super turfy TERF in person, like trans exclusive radical feminist type who was extremely transphobic and horrifying. And she said all these horrible transphobic things directly to my face. And it was wild because she also turned out to be totally femphobic and insulted me as a femme. And she was saying all this stuff where she was like, well, you sold out the minute you put on that lipstick and those earrings, blah, 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 blah. And then meanwhile, I was like, so she is this like super masculine lesbian who wears only men's suits. So she seems to hate femininity and yet hates trans women. Like, do you understand the disconnect there? You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, everything about what you're saying is like nothing about. It almost made me think like the person protests too much and maybe has to really reckon with their own gender stuff, you know, because it was just wild to me that this person did not want trans people in her community and yet seemed to hate femininity and femmes. And I was like, then what are you doing? Like, what? I don't know. I don't think I made the most sense with that statement, but the point being just that it goes back to what I said before about language being so mutable and how language changes. Like, I think if we looked back in history, there would be a lot of butch lesbians who would identify as trans and would maybe have transitioned if that option were available. But then likewise, you know, existing now as we do, I think there's a renaissance happening. I think it's kind of that there is a whole new generation of younger folks who are reclaiming the term lesbian and love it and are like, we need to make sure that that term is never associated with transphobia and like we can still use it but have an expansive definition of what that means. You know, because for me, I'm like, I still like that term and I want to use it. But I also, part of the reason why I don't exclusively use it anymore is that, like, for example, I've dated a lot of people who identified as women and lesbians at the time that we dated, but have since transitioned. Sure. And so then, question mark, is it disrespectful of me to be like, oh, I'm a lesbian, I only date women? Like, that's not really true. That's actually factually inaccurate. Even though, like, I mean, it just kind of makes my whole brain explode. And I'm like, can't we just be so, at this point, chill?
Yeah, that is what...
Like, can we not just be inclusive and welcoming and understand that gender is fucking fluid and that, like,
literally,
we are all going to change our opinions and our feelings and possibly even how we feel and identify, like, hundreds of times over the course of our lives?
And it's just so individualistic because, I mean, talking about before what we were saying about, like, feeling androgynous but presenting, quote unquote, like, femme, like, whatever. It's like you can have two butch women, I'm trying to figure out how to say it. It's like female identified people who like look very much the same, and one of them might feel very strongly like a butch lesbian, and one of them might feel trans, and they quote unquote look or present the same, but it's like they're two different people. You don't know what their fucking inner life is, so neither one is right or it's just like, why can't we acknowledge that some people feel like butch lesbians and some people feel like maybe they're trans masc, and like both things are fine and they might look the same to you from the outside, but they feel different. They have a rich inner life. Like, it's too confusing to try to make one big overriding statement. So when people say things like lesbians are disappearing, it's like, that's such a fucking blanket statement like no, everyone's an individual. Like, just...
it's like the community and the terminology is evolving like anything does. Do you know what I mean? And like we can all have. This is part of where Lauren and I talk about this all the time. Or like is there something wrong, or are we just like literally getting older and being? Like that all the time. Yeah, and being like, oh yeah, like every generation to an extent goes through this like, oh, but it was better in my time, you know, because we have nostalgia for the way that things were, and because things are, that's where our comfort is, you know, like when you're coming into your own in a certain culture, like that's your comfort zone, and things evolve as you get older. And like, I mean, I think all the time about how like the New York City that I knew is literally a memory now. It does not exist.
100%.
Like, and I can get upset about it, and I can, you know, like be like, New York sucks now. It's not the same. It's all been taken over by yuppies. Like I can, and I do say that sometimes, but like, but where does that take me? Like, I, you know, it is what it is, and there are people in that who are existing and who are happy and coming up in that, and they should be allowed to have the experience that they're having too. You know, like I don't own that. Like, you know,
I think it's a real moment for us to get humble, like fucking humble yourselves and realize it's not all about you. Because I think I did have a brief phase where I was like, oh no, butch lesbian identity is disappearing, and that's what I'm attracted to, right?
Sure.
Like I'm attracted to butches, and if all of the butches, you know, transition, then like, uh-oh. And then it's like, guess what, Gina? It's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about me. And like to really, really be happy for people and celebrate people when they find what, you know, brings them joy or works for them. And then also to realize like, oh shit, wait, a lot of people that identify as non-binary actually are what I'm looking for, right?
That's
like
what I was trying to say with my convoluted
who identify as non-binary, like the term butch is maybe not so comfortable for a lot of people, or like, I mean, it's interesting actually, because I feel like my whole life, no one ever really wants to identify as butch because they all feel like they're not butch enough. I've always dated like butches, right? Quote, you can't see my air quotes again. I date butches and they always think they're not butch enough, right? And then to realize like, yeah, because that term just wasn't sitting right on a lot of people, but I can still find that exact same spark with people who are preferring a different term or whatever.
Yeah,
you know, and it doesn't fundamentally change who they are, to be honest. Like,
not at all.
It really, like, these are often we are looking at the same thing and just saying something different. And like, you know, I think it's getting magnified now, A, because of the online discourse, and B, because like we seem to be very, very label obsessed. And I don't know if that's because we're all living our lives online. And so like so much of the way we communicate is actually through like written word, which I think has something to do with like the obsession with label, you know, honestly. But so much of the time it's the same. And I also think it's really ironic going back to like the very turfy lesbian, like butch lesbian that you encountered. Something that made me uncomfortable, you know, about like this quote unquote lesbian culture that's disappearing. And sort of the people that I'm hearing it from, I can't tell you like how many times I encountered like butch lesbians who really were actively taking on a male gender role and like absolutely wanted to be like a quote unquote daddy, and like absolutely wanted me to fit into like a feminine role to like counter that. And I sit there and I'm like, so tell me how like trans men are more toxic than what was happening then, you know? Like, and that's fine. Like if somebody wants to be a daddy and they want some, and it's all consensual, then fucking great. Like I don't care. Yeah. But the truth is,
again,
like,
call me.
Like great. Exactly. That's totally fine. Like it's really one of those things though, where I go like, but why then have an issue with a trans guy? Like I don't, what is the issue? What is the fucking issue?
Right, because toxicity is the actions. It's not the identity or who the person is. Toxicity is the actions. It's when someone is abusive. It's what the person does.
Yes.
And I actually, it's funny. I wrote a whole play about this that is viewable in its entirety for free on YouTube. It's called Femmes, a Tragedy. And I wrote this whole play that's about femmes, and it's a play where there are no masculine lesbians or queer, like whatever. It is a whole play about queer femmes. And it hits on all these things. It talks about like really what is anything except language? Like it's all just language. And at the end of the day, like we're all just like bodies relating to each other in space. And you know,
words. You know?
And if anyone wants to watch it, it's on YouTube for free. Just search Femmes, a Tragedy, and the whole full-length play is on there.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, yay. Well, Gina, I will say on the, you know, as a segue out here, I am very grateful to you, speaking of labels, though, because you gave me the label hard femme during LLO, and I was like, that's what I am. Like, I felt so seen because no one I'd never even known that was a thing, and I was like, that's exactly what I am. like that was what at 30 something. That I felt so like holy shit. So it is amazing to your point about like learning more and more, and you saying something that just like lit a light bulb in me. It was awesome.
That's so amazing. Yeah. That's how I felt when I learned the term demi-femme, of like feeling femme sometimes, but sometimes not. And I was like, wait.
And that's like, how I felt when I learned the term blue jeans femme, because I was like, yeah. See, sometimes labels are great and make you feel like, oh, I'm at home, and but just use them for you. Don't stress about them for other. It's like the simplest rule, and we fuck it up all the time.
Constantly.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no room for transphobia. Like that's, I mean, hello, Stonewall. Like we owe everything to trans folks. Like we just can't as a community tolerate it anymore, you know? And lesbian culture is thriving. The young people love it. Like Google it. There's like butch magazines and butch everything, and like butch identity still exists. Yes. Lesbian this and that still exists. Get on Instagram and check it out.
It's like just because the trans movement is like absolutely having a moment and like having a, I don't know if renaissance is the right word, but like is blossoming, doesn't mean that lesbians are disappearing. It means that like there is a spotlight on trans issues at the moment. We're having a gender revolution. But like I promise you there are still scads of lesbians out there. So don't stress about it.
Well, and you do raise a good point that maybe we need more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like we need more spectacular lesbians in the limelight.
Yeah,
like
dude, we need Rachel Weisz to come out. I hear what you're saying and I support you.
No, but I was even going to say beyond like hot Hollywood actresses. Like we need some real lesbian leaders. We need like our movement needs some more voices that are really, really vocal. Yeah. You know, and I mean, and I know they're out there, they do exist, but again, like on a grander scale, you know.
Yeah. We need a lesbian just, like, president.
Hot actresses. Yeah. Oh, what was that? We need a dyke for president.
Dyke for president. Oh my God. I will be singing in the streets the day that happens. That'd be amazing. Gina, thank you so much. This is awesome. Wow. I could like pick your brain all day. Not that I'm
literally talk to you for hours. So
this was a blast.
Because you have so much stuff online. So tell people how they can find not just like Femmes of Tragedy, but all the sororities. I know sorority is a YouTube channel. Like what's the best way to find you and all the stuff you do?
I mean, the easiest thing to do is go to my website. My website is ginayoung.com. That website has links to sorority and to the sorority YouTube and all that stuff. My Instagram is Gina Genius. I try to post fun stuff on there too. Sorority has an Instagram, which is sorority theater with an R-E. But I think like pretty much my website is the gateway drug, if you will, into the world of all the projects.
That's where they can also find, because you do feminist acting classes as well, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Zoom. And those are on Zoom, so people can attend from anywhere in the world. And I have an email list, and I highly if anyone thinks any of this was interesting, please subscribe to the email list on my website because that's where the real stuff comes out. My Instagram is not necessarily always as good, although it's good. I try to keep it good, but the newsletter is definitely where it happens.
Get on Gina's email list, because also I assume once things move to, we're getting closer and closer to being able to do stuff in person again, and you are just like the fucking queen/king/non-binary ruler of like LA events, like just parties and shows and like all of that. So, oh my God.
You're very sweet. Well, I do have a pretty good success rate. I was just hanging out today with a couple that met at the last party I threw before the pandemic, and they are happily moving in together.
This is what I'm saying. So
I just want everyone to fall in love. I just want y'all to fall in love. That's all I want.
Get on that list, especially if you are, I believe the term was hot gym teacher type. Get on that and write Gina personally.
Yes.
Like, I make fun of mullets a lot, but also I prefer to date mullets. That's kind of my sexual orientation.
For a while. Didn't you rock a mullet?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I'm fully down to probably have one again this year and also date them. So yeah.
In all forms.
I'll keep my eye out. Mm-hmm.
You two are the best. Thank you so much for having me. I love your podcast. I love everything you do.
Thank you for doing this.
Likewise.
And we are, I am at Nicole Pacent on Twitter and Instagram.
I'm at Lauren Flans on Twitter, Lauren_Flans on Instagram.
We are at Coming Out Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Our hashtags are hashtag Coming Out Pod, hashtag Found Ricky. And let me, before we shout out, let me just say, because I spent quite a bit of time in the shower yesterday shaving my legs because it had been a long time. So during that half hour or so, I was thinking about our Instagram, because our Instagram, thanks to me, or no thanks to me, is woefully behind post-wise. We try to like have, posts for each guest, and Lauren has been very good at doing that since I've been gone, but we have several that are like that haven't been posted ever. And so during my shower, I came up with hashtags for every day of the week that were like Throwback Thursday or Flashback Friday, such as like Take Me Back Tuesday was Memory Monday. I came up with all these different ones so that when I am posting these things and you guys see every day of the week, it will always be flashbacks until we catch up. So just know that Instagram is about to get an upgrade.
Oh my God. That will make my OCD so
I knew that would make you happy, Lauren, but I just wanted to let y'all really know. Good. So follow us on Instagram.
I am thrilled.
Also, congratulations on shaving your legs.
Oh, thank you.
That's huge.
I was trying to remember when I'd done that last, and I couldn't remember. So you're way ahead of me.
It really.
I actually learned how to wax my legs in pandemic. I know the looks on your faces say it all. It was extremely painful. I did it maybe twice, and I may never do it again.
Ouch! Yeah. I mean, I commend you for trying. It's very brave.
Yeah. Ooh. Commitment to femme.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh
that's,
my God.
Yeah, that's outside my wheelhouse. Should I shout out our patrons?
Sure,
now?
Shout out our patrons.
I'm going to shout out our patrons! Zet, Janice, Jim W., Kim, Adri, Sarah, BeyondClexa.com, Simone, Kaz, Tanya, Jolene, Mandy, Tia, Sarah Wilson, Pooh, We Bleed Philly, Brittany Ray, Sammy, Helen, Michelle, Carmel, Mix, Michelle Forbes, and former guests Kieran Smiley, Vanessa Hunt, and Kirsten Vangsness.
If you would like to be on that list or check out any of our tiers of giving, you can go to patreon.com/comingoutpod. Lauren just posted a bunch of really great outtakes.
I did. They're fun.
Yes. So check those out. It starts at $1 a month. So if you love the pod, if you want other people to find it, and if all of that, being a patron would greatly help us get it out into the world. And on that note, if you're unable to do that at this point, but you still want to get the pod out in the world, head over to Apple Podcasts, give us an old 5-star review or a very nice rating. That will help our algorithm, and we will love you for it more than we already do.
We sure will. Gina, thank you so much. Thank you for being on Nicole's glorious return episode. This is very special for both of us because we love you.
Yes, thank you.
And Godfather type favors coming. So don't worry about it. Yeah.
Oh, all right, y'all. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next Wednesday. Bye.
Bye.